Hi, folks. This is Dr. Rob Cywes. I am the carb addiction doc. And, sometimes I have these little thoughts that amuse me. And I heard the other day a video of my friend Ken Berry going ballistic about vegans. And he was talking to some guy. And I love Ken. He's just brilliant. But I sat there and I thought, Ken, you're talking about vegetables and vegans and how the diet is. But here's how my brain worked, and I want to share this with you. I am the carb addiction doc, and I don't care if you eat vegetables. But as I thought this through, and as I've seen some stuff on the internet, I thought about this. And just as a backstory, my father, who passed away 2 years ago from in the beginning of the COVID era, spent a large part of his self-care life hybridizing orchids, in particular an orchid called a disa, D-I-S-A. If you've never heard of it, please Google it. It's some of the most beautiful, beautiful orchids that I'm absolutely passionate about. Beautiful colors, but he hybridized them. So he would go to his hothouse and he'd select, I want a tall stem, I want lots of flowers, I want this red color, I want this straw, and he would crossbreed, and he could create pretty much anything, any form or version of that flower that he decided to over a course of a few generations by intentionally selecting and hybridizing. And that was kind of artificial natural selection. Nowadays, with genes, we can even take those genes and splice them in and splice them out. For those of you that are old enough, you'll know what I'm talking about here is that when I was growing up, Brussels sprouts were one of the most disgusting plants that we could eat. They were bitter, they were horrible, and all kids hated them, and all parents try to force their kids to eat them because you know how good vegetables are. And in the late 1990s, a Dutch or Belgian botanist identified the gene that caused bitterness in Brussels sprouts, and he deleted that gene and then created a monoculture of Brussels sprouts. And since that time, Brussels sprouts has now been cultivated, genetically engineered, beyond just what my dad did with hybridization, but genetically engineered to be sweet, to be big, to be more disease resistant. But those are monoclonal. They're single items. So these are single clones of a particular vegetable that is grown because of how tasty they are. And now I was just in Stratford on Avon in England, where Shakespeare comes from, and that whole area is just full of land where they cultivate Brussels sprouts. And in the course of literally 25 years, that entire Brussels sprouts crop has gone from being this bitter, disgusting thing to being this wonderful, sweet Brussels sprouts that when you fry it in oil, olive oil, you maybe throw some bacon on it. It's one of the most delicious things to eat with a lot of reddened salt. However, think about that. That Brussels sprouts has only been really edible for about 20 or 30 years. So as I listened to Ken Berry, I thought, you know what? Let's go back and look. Because if it is important that human beings eat so much fruit and so much vegetables and it's so healthy for us and blah, 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 and we have to eat more grains and well, let's go back and look at the history of the botany of the plants we currently eat. Because the one thing I learned growing up in a garden, growing up with a horticulturist that was a dad, is this one statement. Most plants hate us. Most plants do not want to be eaten by us. And most plants are poisonous. Most plants in the wild type are poisonous to human beings. That is an absolute fact. Most plants in their natural state are poisonous to human beings. So how the hell come we have to eat a plant-based diet? It doesn't compute. But let's look back at that. Because what plants want us to, they do not want us to eat them. So they have a variety of toxins and poisons and antigens that affect us. But what they do want us sometimes to eat is to eat their seeds so that we can transport their seeds in our gut and poop them out. And the way they do that is to protect what's in that seed. They may give us a little bit of starch from that rudimentary little bit, for example, a piece of grass. But ultimately, they want to trigger an inflammatory response in the gut that gets us to poop them out far away. And in that way, we're going to spread the species and diversify them because most plants can't walk. So they use us. But most plants are poisonous. So if you think about it, We've been around for literally hundreds of thousands of years, even possibly 1 million years or so as a species. I don't want to quote those numbers because they're variable on the internet, but it's been a hell of a long time. If we go back and we look at the plants that everybody on the internet and all our doctors and all the famous people are telling us we must eat and a plant-based diet is so good for us, none of those plants existed more than 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Not a single one of them. None of those plants existed 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, which is nothing in the evolution of us as a human species. So how is it possible that these plants that they're pushing at us, the fruit and the vegetables and the grain products, are so healthy and so important for us if as a species we never, ever ate them because they didn't exist? We created them. We created them by hybridization and now by genetic engineering. It does not compute. It does not make sense. And so if you look at most plants that started out poisonous in the wild, humans have cultivated a very, very small fraction of those plants toward becoming more edible, becoming more nutritious, tasting a bit better, and we've selectively bred them over 4,000 to 5,000 of years for a variety of traits, including their size, so they've gotten bigger, their flavor has gotten better, and they become more colorful, they smell better, and they have a higher carbohydrate content. We haven't necessarily improved their nutritious content. We've preserved their disease stability, their size, their carbohydrate content, their energy content. But if you think about it, even for someone as old as me, in the 1950s, an apple was a little sour thing like this that was available for a few months a year. Now it's this huge big thing that's sweet, that lives forever, and is available 24/7. And that's only in the last 40 or 50 years. The other thing we've done with plants is we've moved them around a tremendous amount. We've moved them around tremendously. I mean, here's a little simple fact, okay? And it's just kind of interesting and ironic that if you're Irish, and this is not a diss of the Irish, but the Irish flocked to America in the 1850s because of the potato famines. There was this crop failure and they ran out of potatoes and they were starving and they jumped on ships and came across to New England. That was 1850. So they left their homeland because of potato famine. But let's take this back a little bit earlier. A guy called Chris Columbus, buddy of mine, no, I'm not that old. 1492, Christopher Columbus came to India, what he thought was India, but it actually happened to be America. And he discovered something. I'm just looking at my notes over here. He discovered something, actually not in North America, but in Central and South America, called a potato. So prior to 1492, and when Christopher Columbus came back, potatoes didn't exist in Europe. Potatoes didn't exist. So from 1492 to 1850, the Irish became so dependent on potatoes that a famine nearly destroyed the country, and a lot of them had to leave. Isn't that bizarre how short-lived that is? So prior to Christopher Columbus, potatoes didn't exist in Ireland. How did they get so attached to them? And what did they eat before that? What did the Irish eat prior to 1492? Think about that. This is a very, very recent time. And if you think about how important potatoes are, how important papayas and pineapples, pineapples and papayas come from Hawaii. No, they don't. No, they don't. They come from South America. They never exist in Hawaii until Europeans took them there. So crops have moved tremendously around the world. And it's very, very recent that all these things that are so important, are so fundamental to our diet, that's such a healthy diet, all these plants didn't exist before. I heard an endocrinologist the other day throw the blue zone diet at me, and these people are so healthy and they don't have heart disease because they eat blue zone food and it's all vegan. You go to those blue zone territories, the food that they're currently eating did not exist 500, 1,000 years ago in that specific area. Didn't exist. Those plants did not exist as they are or in that area. So we really have to go back and look at our biology, and there is a beautiful, beautiful documentary. There's a book, if you like to read, written by Michael Pollan, Pollan, and the documentary that I watched is beautiful. You can Google it on YouTube. It's called The Botany of Desire. The Botany of Desire. Brilliant discussion. It's a documentary film, and it looks at the origins of selective breeding of 4 different types of plants. And one of those is actually marijuana, potatoes, but it looks tulips. So it looks at the way we have cultivated and hybridized plants over the last little while. And I love tulips. I was in Amsterdam with friends of ours, actually a patient of mine, and they've become close friends of ours in Amsterdam. Just wonderful, wonderful family. Shout out to you guys. But during my visit in Amsterdam, we walked around some of their markets, and just, if you've never been to Amsterdam, it's my favorite, one of my favorite cities in Europe. In fact, I would say the favorite city of mine in Europe. And as we walked around, I just saw these brilliant colors, these double tulips, how incredibly hybridized they got. Deep purples, they got oranges, they got pink, all different colors that I'd never seen before, that have all been genetically engineered. And they advertise that on the box where they're selling these bulbs. They've all been cultivated in the last decade. These are plant species that did not exist a decade ago. And for those of you that are vegetarian or vegan and you love your kale and your broccoli and Brussels, you're eating cabbage. You're eating cabbage. Every single one of those things that you love to eat, cabbage, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, collards, collard greens, Chinese cabbage, bok choy, all of that stuff came from one plant. Cabbage. And if I showed you a wild cabbage, you would not recognize it as a cabbage. But they've been artificially bred from wild cabbage to emphasize different parts of the plant. That's all we're eating, and we're pitching and we're selling as being so healthy. It is one plant that humans never ever had in their lives. We didn't evolve with it. We didn't grow up with it. So how the hell is it that those things have become, at least by their statement, so necessary in our diet? How can vegans tell me that it's so essential that humans are designed to eat plants when those... Calm down. When those plants didn't exist a few generations ago? How is it possible for a vegan to justify, or even a vegetarian to justify their food selection, when it is an anti-human diet, in that those plants never existed before? You know, one of the reasons that North American Indians never developed agriculture on a large scale is because there was just nothing damn well edible here in America, in North America. What plants and fruits that we currently eat come from North America? Well, the berries, blackberries, blueberries, cranberries, dewberries, gooseberries, grape, raspberry, and strawberries. That's the North American selection of fruit. And what vegetable? And you'll think that this came from a place it didn't come from. It's called the Jerusalem artichoke. That's it. There's the list. That's what comes from North America. So I'll repeat. The reason North American Indians, or the Native American people over here, Indians and Inuits, never developed agriculture on a large scale is because there was nothing damn well to eat here. Bunch of grass. This only changed. Their migration toward plants as edible only began to change when they began trading with their more agriculturally prosperous neighbors in Central and South America, before the Europeans came over here. But the Central Americans had papaya, they had sapote, they had corn. Corn comes from Central America. The South Americans had avocados, green beans, pineapples, strawberries, and a whole bunch of beans, peppers, pumpkin, potatoes, squash, sweet potato, and tomatoes. Those all come from the New World. So if you're living in Europe pre-Christopher Columbus, those things did not exist in Europe. There's no magic to this, folks. Think about how plants have moved around, how we've hybridized them. This is just, I'm reading off this, but it is absolutely beautiful to read the evolution of this. And then you think about it, the tomato, the humble tomato that every Italian cannot survive without. Well, the tomatoes originally in the wild form came from a member of the deadly nightshade family, and was once believed to be poisonous, and was actually called a love apple, in that way if you ate it, you could die. And that throughout most of history, the Italians had no tomato sauce for their spaghetti. And the spaghetti wasn't made of corn, it was made of wheat, which did occur in Europe. So we really have to understand the very, very, very recent development of plants as edible things in our world. So if we're not eating plants, what the hell did we evolve with? Because way back as a primate species, our intestine was developed so that we could handle cellulose, which ruminant cows can metabolize in their 4-chamber stomach, gorillas can metabolize in their colons. But we've lost that. Our colon can't do that. Our stomach can't do that. So as a human species, we lost the ability to use plants as a primary source of nutrition because plants were not nutritious, and the only part of the nutritious value of a plant we could not metabolize, which means that plants are not part of human evolutionary culture, except for the last few thousand years. What did we eat? Well, we migrated out of the jungles and we started eating more and more animals. And our brains are mostly made of fat, cholesterol and fat, which had to come from marine animals for the most part, because those are the essential fatty acids. So we ate marine animals, we ate animals that came down to shorelines, and we are an animal-dominant species as our primary source of nutrition in every continent in the world. But as we became smarter eating animals, we could then reliably develop crops that we could plant in and develop agriculture as a supplementation to our animal-based diet. So this bullshit by the vegans and the vegetarians that their diet is healthy is absolute hogwash. I've got stronger words than that, because the plants they tell us are so important for us to eat didn't exist before. Go and look at that Botany of Desire. It's a beautiful, beautiful documentary. But learn about our recent history. And you'll understand, not designed to consume plants, not designed to consume processed carbohydrates, designed for animals, for protein, for fat, for animal nutrients. That's why a ketogenic diet, to circle back to my friend Ken Berry, is the proper human diet. And an animal-based diet is what human beings are designed to eat, because in the last 5,000 years, this hasn't adapted very much at all. The only thing that's adapted in the last couple of centuries is the development, the evolution for the first time ever, maybe since the ancient Egyptians, is the concept of a dad bod. And a dad bod is a sedentary bod that eats a bunch of plant-based carbohydrates, and it sucks, and it will represent the end of us as a species. Get back to eating animals, folks. And when you get in your spaceship and come back here in 100,000 years' time, maybe then we'll eat some plants. But we are not designed to eat them. We designed them. We designed plants as a source of stability, not as a source of nutrition. They smell good, they taste good, they look good, they're easy to cultivate, easy to hybridize, but they didn't exist 5,000 years ago. Now, you could say the same about the animals. The only natural food that we eat in abundance is fish, seafood, because it's wild caught. But all the animals we eat have also been hybridized. They've been hybridized to be bigger, to have more muscles, to have more fat. No question, a hog is different than a wild boar, but not that much different. Cows are a little bit different than bison, but not that much different. A little bit more fat, more marbled. But the animals, the meat that we eat, has been hybridized absolutely. But the hybridization process doesn't happen in a season. The hybridization process takes years and decades to happen, so it's been slower. And the transformation of our animal products has been far slower. Yes, absolutely it's happened. And perhaps that's not such a good thing. But if you go out and you eat deer meat and you eat lamb or you eat beef, you eat buffalo, it's not that different. It's not that different. It certainly has not happened at the pace that we've hybridized plants. So this video is just there to make you think about what you're doing. And if plants were so important for us, think about the billions of dollars that were spent on meatless meat burgers. John Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger made tons of money, and the stock went up, and they produced all this pink slime that we called meatless burgers, and then it just crashed. Why? Because we as human beings are not designed to eat that pink slime. We're just not. People made a lot of money off it. They sold us a bill of goods. But if you go back and look at what they put in there, it wasn't anything that human beings can tolerate or benefit from. It was crap. Let's get back to biologic basics, folks. The best argument to have against your vegans and against your vegetarian friends who are insistent that their diet is so healthy, where did that come from? Let's look at the origins of everything that you eat. Didn't exist a few years ago. I hope this made you think. I hope this put some tools in your toolkit against the vegetarian people, especially if you're keto carnivore, leaning more on the carnivore side. Don't be afraid to challenge their doctrines, because they're very, very flimsy. I am the Carb Addiction Doc. I am mostly carnivore in my own diet, and I'm proud of that and arrogant. I'm as arrogant as a vegan is about their diet when it comes to eating meat. If you want to set up a consult, if you want to visit, if you want to understand this more, text us at 561-517-0642. But do your research. That's the beauty about the Google. That's the beauty about the internet. Look this up. Don't believe me. Go back and look at what all of the corn, the wheat, it was just grass. It was just grass a few years ago. Now we've got corn and we've got couscous and we've got quinoa and we've got all these sexy grains. It all started out as grass, folks. Go back and look at the lineages of what we're eating. Very, very little out there. Very little out there. I will see you next time. Take care.